Um, I am delighted that this is our first online event, which happened because Alex and Yvette pushed their idea that they wanted to start a reading series and pushed it to happen online. So thank you to them. When we do readings at the bookstore, we always do the little thing. So this event for the Nexus of East Hampton, Massachusetts, takes place on lands traditionally owned by the Pocumtuck people. And we wish to acknowledge them as traditional owners. We'd also like to pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and native elders of other communities who may be here today. And I will pass this over to Alexandra Manglis and Yvette Novu, who are both MFA students at UMass Amherst and have put this series together and are the co-hosts, and they will introduce our fabulous readers, Karen Lord and Teresa Gratton. Thank you.
Thanks, Gavin, for hosting us. Really pleased to be here. Really pleased for this to be our first event. Welcome to the first event of Strange Light reading series. It was meant to be a face-to-face event starting in March, and then suddenly we're all in quarantine. But I'm realizing one very important thing about quarantine and not traveling is that everyone is suddenly Zoom proficient, and that means that we can have people speak to us from Barbados and Kansas in the same space, in the same room. And so I'm really excited that we're able to already have a international element to our reading series today. I would encourage you all, the attendees, there's a Q&A button down there. If you have questions while the readings are happening, or if there are things that you want to ask our readers that you've always had on your mind, just go ahead and ask, and you can also vote for your favorite question, and we'll come back to those questions at the very end when the readings are over. But for now, I'm gonna pass it on to Yvette to introduce our readers, and I'm gonna try and turn my camera off. I'm gonna see if I can make that happen.
Yeah, we're so excited to have these two wonderful readers for the inaugural Strange Light reading, and I'm excited to introduce them tonight. Barbadian author, editor, and research consultant Dr. Karen Lord is known for her debut novel, Redemption in Indigo, which won the 2008 Frank Collymore Literary Award, the 2010 Carl Brandon Parallax Award, the 2011 William L. Crawford Award, the 2011 Mythopoeic Fantasy Award for Adult Literature, and the 2012 Keach's Golden Tentacle Best Debut, and was longlisted for the 2011 Bocas Prize for Caribbean Literature and nominated for the 2011 World Fantasy Award for Best Novel. Her second novel, The Best of All Possible Worlds, won the 2009 Frank Collymore Award and the 2013 Book Reviewers Choice Awards for Best Science Fiction Novel. Its sequel, The Galaxy Game, was published in January 2015. She's the editor of the 2016 anthology, New Worlds, Old Ways, Speculative Tales from the Caribbean. Her most recent novel, Unraveling, was published by Dole Books in June 2019. And our other reader is Tessa Gratton, who is the author of adult science fiction and fantasy, The Queen of Innis Lear and Lady Hotspur from Dole Books, as well as several YA series and short stories, which have been translated into 22 languages. Her most recent YAs are the original fairy tales, Strange Grace and Night Shine. Though she has lived all over the world, she currently resides alongside the Kansas Prairie with her wife. You can visit her website, tessagratton.com, for more information. So how we're doing this is that Tessa Gratton will be reading first, and what she's reading was actually selected by Dr. Karen Lord, so that will be super interesting. And then we're gonna have Karen Lord reading next, and what she's reading was selected by Tessa Gratton. So it'll be interesting to see, what they chose for each other and what questions are gonna arise from that. So Welcome, and a virtual applause to our wonderful readers.
There, am I unmuted? Yes. Hi, I'm Tessa Gratton. I am going to be reading from Nightshine, which is my most recent novel. It is a dark, queer, Howl's Moving Castle, is how I've been pitching it to people. It is really the only thing that I think you need to know for this reading is that the magic is very invested in bargaining and names. So names have like some of the ultimate power in this place. And it is the story of an orphan named Nothing who goes on a quest to rescue someone from the sorceress who eats girls and discovers a lot of things about herself. And Karen chose chapter 34 for me to read, which is was a really intense choice for me when she said that, because it's about 2/3 of the way through the book. But as I was practicing, I was realizing that it's such a unique choice and also remarkably self-contained. So thank you, Karen, for making me rethink how to pick stuff for readings. Here we go, chapter 34. In the deepest cavern of the fifth mountain, a heart pulsed hard in the prison of smoky quartz, and then the crystal cracked. The sound echoed sharply throughout the obsidian corridors, skittering along granite floors and pooling around stalactites. The sorceress who eats girls felt it before she heard it, rather like a flicker of lightning before thunder. Her own heart had fluttered before, with weakness and skipping, and she thought at first it was only the same such. She paused her reading and slipped the quill between the pages to mark her place before pressing her palm to her chest. Then the echo reached her library, reverberating through the very stone of the mountain so low, so final, that the sorceress gasped. She lost control, and sharp feathers sprouted up her cheekbones and down her spine, and her shoulder blades ached with the powerful press of wings. Her finger bones curled and started to crack, but the sorceress breathed again and forced her body to her will. Standing, she walked at a measured pace, full of dread, through the library hearth and directly into the heart chamber. The eerie glow of the mountain had faded quite a lot, but she did not have the energy to spare for a crown of glowing bat-bone light or an aether torch. The sorceress took one of the far spiraling staircases and made her way over an arch and then beneath a perpendicular stair to the plinth in the center of the cavern. The smoky quartz had blackened and cracked nearly in half. That old last heart she bargained for sat in a gruesome puddle, congealed and stringy, dead. The sorceress who eats girls did not touch it. She stared, allowing herself a moment to grieve, not for the girl or the heart, but for herself. This ending had come faster than she'd expected, and now her choices were two. Go find another girl, another heart, and betray her half-promise to Nothing, or hold the power of the fifth mountain a day, a week, a month if she could, hoping Nothing returned quickly and in time, before the sorceress was as much a puddle of congealed magic as that dead heart. She flinched as the heart shuddered, then berated herself for the weakness. To prove she was unaffected, the sorceress grasped the remains of the heart in her hand. It was cold and sticky, only so much spoiled meat. Lifting it out of its shattered crystal cradle, the sorceress squeezed until globs smeared between her fingers and slithered over her knuckles before plopping to the platform at her feet. One tiny chunk hit the toe of her silk slipper. The sorceress cast it away with a cry. She flung up her hands and leapt from the platform. Wings unfurled, and she bowed them in wide arcs to slow her descent. She landed on the floor of the cavern in a gentle crouch, black talons gouging the stone. She strode out, angry enough to go the long way, especially as she should not expend more unnecessary magic traveling through the shadow ways of the mountain. She missed the cruel laugh of her demon when she was upset. How it would be amused at her now, judging her for letting it come to this. How can you despise me for loving you, she demanded once, and it had answered, then judge me for my weakness too, and give me a life of my own to ruin at your side. That is what I want, more than I want to devour the whole world. If that is not love, what is? The sorceress closed her eyes and sneered at herself, a high hiss through her razor teeth, because she'd been alone for so long. And then her mountain had suddenly been alive again. Alive with only the energy of that strange, pretty, surprising girl. How she wanted to shred that pretty skin, reach down that hot throat and awaken the spark of her demon. She would have kissed it to awareness, chewed it into fullness. Sorceress! It was her. The sorceress stopped, nearly colliding with nothing. No, nothing was different. The girl was different, fuller somehow. The sorceress's heart began to beat again, and she'd hardly noticed it pause. But the girl stared up at her, expression wide with, it was hard to say. What's wrong? The girl asked. Her voice was thicker, her dark brown eyes vivid with sparks of fire. Was she slightly taller? More elegant and graceful despite the thin tunic that barely skimmed her knees and her scraggly, tangled black hair? Was the sorceress hallucinating because she was so very exhausted from the weight of the mountain? No, this was illusion. The girl was on the barge, sailing far away from here. This was the magical projection of herself, that was all. The girl had changed her self-knowledge, and thus her projection had changed. A shimmer of scales, the color of starlight, appeared like a sheen of sweat under the young woman's eyes and along her brow. The sorceress said, "You're you." A pit opened inside her, filled with fear and love. The girl smiled broadly, and somehow it was both a dark night smile and brilliant dappled starlight. "I am," she cried, and then turned in a circle to show off. A flicker of moon-bright wings spread from her shoulders, moth wings, gone again, and the young woman stepped nearer to the sorceress. "I wanted to show you. I named myself sorceress. I'm free of the binding. I feel so massive," she laughed. It was another surprise. This young woman, this creature, was constantly catching the sorceress off guard, changing expectations, pushing and pulling. She was exhilarating, and the sorceress tried to smile, but her mouth was a monster's mouth, chitin hard and full of shark's teeth. With effort, she dragged herself into her woman form, leaving only teeth and eyes like monsters. Sweat broke down her back and under her breasts. It should have been easy, but the mountain's heart was dead. As the new young woman stared at her, joyous and strange, the sorceress realized what had happened. She'd named herself, and it did break her free of the binding, not only of Kieran, but of everything she had been. The rebirth was complete, finally. That is why the mountain's heart had cracked. "Do you remember?" the sorceress asked in a rough whisper. The reborn mountain, the girl of the demon heart, grabbed the sorceress's hands and her eyes sparked again. She squeezed and said, "I remember fire and a joy so sharp it must be ecstasy. That's inside me, a power I'm so large with." "Mountain size," the sorceress said. The young woman laughed. "Sometimes it's as tiny as a flower, a balsam, I think, with weird petals, but it likes the taste of lava rock." It sounded like nonsense, and the sorceress wanted to ask for the demon girl's new name. Instead, she said, "Be gentle with your body as you learn to be massive too." "How can a mountain fit inside this?" She flung out her arms again and spun. "I'm so alive." "Are you coming home?" "Not yet. I will, but not yet. I have to see Kieran home, and I have to show the great demon of the palace. I have to see my old friends and make everyone safe. I want to stay for the investiture, to make everything in order. Then I will. The sorceress held herself still. Be quick, tender heart, she said with as little of inflection as possible. Because you miss me? The brilliant young woman said with an edge, a dare. Because I cannot hold the mountain forever. I will hunt again soon. She would not tell the girl the heart was already dead, that this rebirth had killed it. The sorceress refused to have her come home to save other girls, or out of desperation or a belief that she must. It would be a choice. This young woman had said it herself when she was called nothing. She would choose to come home, or never do so. Something like disappointment bled into the young woman's large brown eyes, drawing the sorceress. How the sorceress wanted to kiss her again, to taste the new flavors that must be there. How she wanted to ask her new name. Instead, the sorceress bared her jagged shark's teeth and leaned in. You'd better be ready when you come back to me, to hold your own against me and with me. I might eat you alive. The young woman bared her teeth back, but they were only small white human teeth, pretty as pearls. In her eyes, though, the volcano rumbled, and the sorceress felt an answering heat inside her. I hope you try, the young woman said. With that, she vanished, pulled back to the barge and her body, pulled away as she always was pulled away. The sorceress let go a tiny gasp of pain as she listed sideways, sinking against the smooth granite corridor. Her skin ruffled, her bones ached. She was a woman, a monster, both and neither. She gritted her teeth and held on to herself, but barely.
Ah, yes, yes, yes. I chose that. I know I get to say why I chose that.
Yes, tell me why, including me.
So first of all, everybody needs to know that I met Tessa when we worked together on Ellen Kushner's Tremontaine, the cereal box. And what I discovered when I started reading Tessa's works is that you can't put them down. Now, I am a seasoned reader. You know, that sort of stuff used to happen when I was younger. I'm a lot tougher now. So when there's a book that, you know, I'm like, well, I'll just put in a chapter or two before bed. And then it's like, you know, 1:30 and I'm still at it. You know, I kind of question myself. And Tessa's work does that. And part of the reason and why that reading has been chosen is that there are two things her books have. One of them is that there's this relationship with the land, with the landscape, in a way that the land almost becomes a character. And I found that just something that I deeply identified with. I found that something that it's more than a sense of place. It's more than good description. We're talking about an activeness, an agency that the land has. But the second thing is that whether she's writing an adult novel, whether she's writing YA, even if there's romance in there, the core moment of the book is the moment for the protagonist to fully realize who they are. It's almost like the, you know, the sort of the, if it were romance, it would be like when the couple get together and everything is fantastic and fine and they've surmounted all their difficulties and you just have that amazing moment. So when you hear that reading and you can see there's still that tension where the sorceress realizes that she has to let nothing go again. But the moment that I'm looking for in there is the moment where nothing is like, how massive am I? Look at what I am. And then she just spews this poetry that maybe doesn't make sense, but it still resonates so much. And that kind of lifts me up. And that's the moment I'm chasing when I'm unable to put your book down. So is that intentional, Tessa?
That's the moment I'm chasing when I'm writing a book. So I'm really glad that that is something that you at least can identify. The moment of epiphany or...
Epiphany, that's a very good word for it. Yeah.
Sometimes in my book, I think it veers closer to catharsis because some of my books are a lot more based in I don't know, tragedy, maybe the inevitable spiraling descent into human tragedy, but not this one. This one is definitely a book.
And this one is YA, correct?
Yeah.
This one. And I have to say that although it is defined as YA, there's something about Tessa's YA. I kind of understand the tropes of YA somewhat. I am not a specialist, but there's still something about her YA that leans so much into the same satisfactions I get from adult literature that I sometimes don't know where the boundary is with you. I know that you must know. I know that you have the sense of the patterns and whatever, but I can just read both and either in terms of what you're reading and feel as satisfied and as I'm able to put the book down.
When I am setting out to write a book, if it ends up being inherently about the main character growing up is the easiest way to say it, but really choosing who they want to be, then I veer it toward YA. And if the main characters have already, like, they think they know who they want to be, or they've already made those choices, then it's probably going to be an adult book for me. That's really the core of it. And the chapter that I just read is a little bit misleading in that, because if this book was about the sorceress who eats girls, it would be an adult book, because she knows exactly who she is and who she wants to be and has for like 110 years or something. But except for like 3 chapters scattered throughout, it's all from Nothing's point of view. And it's really about her coming to that realization, that she can rename herself and can become something different or something old, like pieces of what she was before. So that's what makes Nine young adult to me, is it's about the main character choosing how to grow up.
Yeah. I would just say that epiphanies are not only for the young, but I understand it and I accept your reasoning. But I do think that as you reinvent yourself as an adult, those same moments can be very, very satisfying to read.
I would definitely categorize Best of All Possible Worlds as an epiphany book, which is one of the reasons it's so dear to my heart.
Oh, cool. I guess I should read now, right? Before I get too caught up in talking about themes. So I'm reading from Redemption in Indigo, which is not out just recently. It was out 10 years ago, June to be precise, but in June, the world was exploding, so we didn't really have a chance to commemorate that. It's my first book, as you would have heard, but the nice thing about it is that I managed to take a folk tale that I read as a child that I enjoyed, and I took it and I expanded it because I thought, this is an amazing heroine and I want to give her more adventures. So an amazing heroine needs an amazing antagonist. And Tessa gave me the task of not near the end of the book or by any stretch of imagination, but I am at chapter 7. And this was when I was titling, I shouldn't say this is when I was titling chapters, because I did title chapters in the Best of All Possible Worlds as well. And it's called A Senior Zombie Misses Something Dear to Him. Zombie is a bit of a made-up word. Those who are from the West Indies, from the Caribbean, would know that it's really Jumbi, which is to say, some kind of not human, supernatural entity of some sort. And the ones in this book are also called the Undying, and they're responsible for several things, like, maybe something happening that's beneficial to you, a miraculous save, or somebody, something like a trickster, something pulling at you at night or causing you to fall into some difficulty that you just don't know. Hi, Anne Van der Veers here. Hi. Sorry. Something that you just can't explain, that just, those were the things that go bump in the night. So here we go. Picture a hall. The roof is vaulted timber with winged creatures carved into the beams that arch overhead. The floor is cold stone, dark and light, like an oversized chessboard. There are pillars, also of stone, that lend a solid, reassuring support to the descending arc of the roof. The stone of the pillars glitters faintly, as if hewn of some unpolished gem. Beyond the pillars are more pillars. If they are walls, I cannot see them to give you any report of them. It is supposed to be majestic, the hall of a high lord. Instead, it is empty, sterile, and cold, speaking not of present pomp, but of ultimate futility. It proclaims that all is vanity. There is a throne. The throne is unoccupied. Now that you have that scene firmly in your heads, I can bring in the villain. I have mentioned previously the 3 different categories of undying ones. Never assume that these categories represent boundaries that are never crossed or lines that cannot be redrawn. It is not the known danger that we most fear, the shark that patrols the bay, the lion that rules the savannah. It is the betrayal of what we trust and hold close to our hearts that is our undoing. The captain who staves in the boat, the king who sells his subjects into slavery, the child who murders the parent. The zombie are like the human creatures they meddle with, apt either to great evil or great good. And sometimes they switch sides. This one was the unknown danger. He had switched sides. He'd started with benevolence and with the belief that there is a fine potential in humankind waiting only to be tapped. He now viewed the whole stinking breed as a pest and a plague. We may view him as a villain, but he would see us as cockroaches. He had made for himself a very striking shadow. During his days of borrowing shadows, he had noted how responsive the human creature could be to a messenger clothed in classic beauty. As he became more powerful, he was careful at first, making his image handsome enough, but not too handsome to excite envy, and always being careful to add that slight signature difference that underlined his alien nature. Then he did less of walking with the creatures and more of observing and influencing from a distance. And he discovered that a form closer to the ideal obtained better results for his brief visitations. Even then, if he had only realized it, he had started to slip, caring less and less about the people he was supposed to be helping and focusing much more on the respect and admiration that he felt was his due right as a superior being. When at last he became cynical, he set his form and features to the zenith of perfection, and then, instead of choosing a subtle mark, he made his skin deep indigo, a stark and utter setting apart that provoked as much of horror as of awe, mingled as it was with that unearthly beauty. Clothed in white linen like a chief, he walked the broad aisle of his hall. There was no smile on his face, and it looked as if there had not been one in some time. Occasionally, a muscle by his jaw twitched, as if he chewed on bitter and painful thoughts. But his walk was slow and peaceful. Then he passed a pillar, and the control was abruptly abandoned. He lashed out at the innocent stone, striking a shard of square-faceted crystal from the smooth side of the pillar. The hall shivered at the blow. He was angry. He was more than angry. He kept telling himself how angry he was, but the truth was that he was ashamed. He had not had reason to question himself and his deeds for a very long time, but now others had dared to judge him and apparently find him wanting. They had taken away that aspect of his power of which he was most proud, his ability to balance the forces of chaos. No, he would not stand for this. The power of chaos was his. He was the only one who could control it, and he was going to take it back. Now resolved, he snapped his fingers and dissolved the royal hall. It was just another fleeting amusement, designed to alleviate the aching boredom of purposelessness that he felt so often of late. Then he let himself fall from empty air, diving from an impossible height for many long seconds until he pierced the surface of the ocean, dragging innumerable trails of bubbled air after him. Down he went, deep, deep down, with all the momentum the high fall had provided. The water turned quickly from clear aquamarine to a dark, murky green blue. Then a thick, smoky darkness proclaimed that the light had failed to beat this far through the layers of liquid. Yet there was light. An eerie, greenish glow loomed ahead. Greetings, Lord. Remember that the Jambi customs to have no names. How did this one manage to snag for himself such a noble title? Greetings, King of Dark Waters. I am looking for a focus of chaos. Have you seen anything unusual? The shadowy king gurgled and swished a lazy tentacle. I am the most unusual thing in these waters, and that is as it should be. Ask another. We want no trouble here. His words were disquieting. Had they warned the king about him? Still, no one could lie to him. If the king said chaos was not here, it was not. He bade him a polite but cold farewell and repeated his long dive in reverse, shooting up and out of the water with such force that he went several meters into the air. Are you looking for me? Came a sly voice. The undying one spun gracefully and came to float alongside the speaker. I am, and I have found you. My question is, have you found chaos? The commander of bright wings flapped his wingtips with a flair that was almost apologetic. My lord, would I go looking for chaos? We have enough to do here to survive without dabbling in affairs too grand for us. Ask someone else. Only one element of the living remained, but the thought of walking the earth again made him pause and shiver fastidiously, as if in anticipation of dirt and grime. He braced himself and set his feet to ground. It was not hard to find her. She rarely left her savannah these days. Her right foreleg stamped, sounding the earth like a hollow drum, and her right eye looked at him with an unfriendly glitter. Jambi or not, he instinctively put himself out of the range of the sweep of her trunk. Clearly, the queen of ever-changing lands was not pleased to see him. He asked his question with uncharacteristic diffidence. Do I not have enough trouble with your kind taking advantage of the insects and inciting the humans to greater and greater damage? She blared in reply. Of course I have seen chaos. Where the focus of it might be, I cannot tell you. Ask one of your own. Swallowing his pride, he went to a well-known Jambi, the godfather of the troublemakers. Strange seeing you here, Lord. It was the spider of Ahani, and when he said Lord, he took care to make it sound like a poorly delivered joke. You know what I'm looking for. Do not trifle with me. He was beginning to lose his temper. I trifle? I assure you, I am the one who's been hard done by. What is this new experiment you and your people are trying? Not my people, not before and not now, and I do not know what you are talking about. I am referring to this human who now wields the power of the Jambi. He took a deep breath. This surely was news of a most chaotic type, unraveling the natural order of things. No human can manage the power of the Jambi. They lack the most basic of skills. They're not even designed for it. Someone has been tricking you, O trickster. The spider only smiled. I hear she is a natural with the chaos stick. A burning hatred poured over his veneer of calm like flames spreading on an oil slick. To take away his power so cavalierly and then to give it to a human? Was that not the insult that crowned the injury? He was appalled at their lack of decency. Still, they didn't call this one the trickster for nothing. He struggled with himself, hid his emotion, and continued. Let us imagine for a moment that I believe you. Where is this human to be found? And what marvels has it worked? The spider understood him in an instant. I have no more to say to you. Give a spider a bad name and let him hang. You know I cannot lie to you, but you will never trust my words. Go to Makenda. See for yourself. Forget that I said anything about the situation. In fact, I wash my hands of the whole business. With a beautifully feigned air of offended injury, the spider stalked away. The indigo lord returned briefly, recreated his hall with a careless thought, and began to angrily pace its floors. Its emptiness was an unbearably painful mockery, mirroring the aching gap left by the extracted power. He refused to beg the zombie to return his power, and none of the troublemakers was likely to want to help him. By choice, he had always worked alone. He had no allies, no juniors to send to do his bidding. There was only one option. He would have to go to Makenda himself and get his power back. There we go.
Yay! I love that chapter, and I picked that for several reasons, but the primary reason is because I love the Indigo Lord with Night Being.
You love your problematic monster boys who kind of still have
the villains. And I find it fascinating that we both spontaneously picked a villain perspective for the other read.
Yeah.
And I definitely the Indigo Lord and the Sorceress Who Eats Girls would murder each other.
Yes.
Absolute murder.
Mm-hmm.
But also at the same time in my heart, they're friends.
Deep down, when they've come through a few things and worked some things out.
So one of the things that I really admire about your work in general, and I remember noticing this when I read Redemption for the first time long before I knew you, is that the book, the way that you weave the narrator and different perspectives and the voice, all of these things together, it simultaneously invited me into something that I didn't understand, but at the same time was very much but just trust me, it's gonna be great and worth it. And it felt like a magical space, like a space in between a real world and the magical world, and even myself and the book itself. And I have that experience frequently with your books, but in this one in particular, it always felt like you were invoking that so much on purpose. And so when I got to this chapter where you suddenly, it really is kind of oh, by the way, there is a villain, and I'm going to give you a great chapter just about him. It was sort of shocking, but also delightful. And so that chapter has just stuck with me ever since the first time I read it. And one thing that I wanted to really ask you about is that, because it's been years, and so this book came out more than 10 years ago, and I was wondering so you've changed in 10 years, the world has changed in 10 years, but the book doesn't actually change. The text is what it was. And so I was wondering, does it mean something different to you now? I guess I'm just going to leave it at that. Does the book mean something different to you than it did 10 years ago as the author?
It does in a way, because first of all, I realized how much of it was very much an unconscious thing. I think anytime you write your first book, you're really just looking to finish a damn manuscript, right? You're not specialized in what structure does. You're not specialized in various things. I should say some people write their first novels in an MFA program. I was not that fortunate. I was winging it. So I'm winging it, and I'm just thinking, what did I used to like to read? And as I said, the fact is that I was basing this off of my favorite folk tale as well. So it was a kind of a sharing. It was a kind of here's this really cool character that was given to me as a child, and now I'm going to introduce her to you and show off more of what she can do. I know that you guys didn't hear this cool character in the reading, but that means you have to go get the book. But afterwards, I've come back and I've looked and seen, okay, where is the structure? Where is the structure? What were you doing almost unconsciously? And the magical thing for me is to look at Caribbean literature and see some of those same structures and tropes that I was unconsciously channeling, especially in terms of almost spiraling, kind of structure of story development. There's a lot of threes going on. Things happen and then they get wrapped up in a whole three, and then it links onto something else as another whole three. So it almost looks like a filigree kind of pattern, as opposed to some just like going to a climax and then coming down to a denouement. And I think that, and can I just fangirl for a second? Thank you, Gavin, because when I was submitting this to people, they really didn't know what to do with it. Because clearly they were like, what is this person trying to do? Where does this end? So on and so forth. But Gavin, I always say, has maybe a bit of the Commonwealth, and as a Scot also has the folklore love and just the kind of the mentality that would allow you to see how that can be done. And he really just like was able to see the book in a way that a lot of people couldn't. I still have a few of the rejections saved. They're lovely. And then after that, I immediately panicked and said, oh my goodness, I can't be a one-hit wonder. I have to do this again. And I immediately started to write the sequel. And the sequel was so hard, it took me 10 years, and it just got published last year as Unraveling. And a lot of it was my understanding, and this was almost a revelation to me, that books never really end, because the whole thing is called redemption. And then at the end, he's still questioning, what is redemption? Have I attained it? Can I attain it? So that was what Unraveling was supposed to be about. And that took me some real hard, long thought. So I love this book because it is both an evolution of craft and an evolution of theology. It's a way to take a character from 10 years before and kind of grow with them and find more depth and meaning in why they made certain choices. And most of all, it gave me great satisfaction to almost imagine the characters themselves having like a deep, rich life, even if I didn't write about it in between the books, that I could then portray with these little glimpses so that you can see the bonds and the love between them. It's always going to be a very living book for me. I was babbling, sorry.
What made you decide now is the time for Unraveling? Like, did you just think that maybe you could handle the structure, or you were haunted so much by the characters, or you really, really needed to sell a new book?
All of the above. Well, yeah, really needing to sell a new book and get paid was definitely a factor. But ultimately for me, it was, why I struggle with Unraveling is that Redemption in Indigo is one of the most family-friendly books you can find. You can probably read it to a 5-year-old in great safety. Unraveling is not. And I couldn't understand for my own self why I was taking the sequel and just like pushing it almost in the direction of horror. And I stalled for a good few years because I was trying to make it gentler. I was trying to clean it up. There was a step I had to take in there that I didn't want to take. And Tessa, you know what that's like. When the book says to you, I'm sorry, look, this is what I am. Either you're going to write that down, or you're going to just like stop there, because you can't fake it past there. So I fought with it for a bit, and I was like, okay, you know what? You're a weird thing, but you're your own thing, and I will just like actually relax into you and give you what you need to be. And then there was a point where I could look at it and literally see the stuff I'd written 10 years ago compared to the stuff I'd written recently. Well, not 10 years, because it would have been more like 7 then. But, your style does change. Your style does evolve. It evolves very quickly in the first few years as a professional author. And the seams were really there. So I had to spend a lot of time with a local editor saying to him, look, there are all these shadows of old plots and all these, you know how that goes. It's like the plot changes and then you go back and like, have I removed all the references? And So it became a very tangled thing. But then when I finally like homed it all free, I was like, okay, you know what? I think this is all I can do with it. I think it has to fly and you know, fly or fall on its own merit now. I do think I am grateful for that. There is a sense that you get, not that the book is perfect, but that the book is done. That there's seriously, that I mean, you may need to have a good editor come and wrestle with it for you, you know, so as to like get the right this out. But there's a point where you yourself recognize there's nothing more I solo can do. There's nothing even like a local editor can do for me. It has to go out and be hammered into place by at the publishing level.
Yeah.
I think we're ready for audience questions, are we?
Lay it on us. Are we supposed to do that? Is someone coming back?
Yeah, we have some questions in like the Q&A. So the first one from Marcella Haddad. Have either of you ever had a story that got too massive or complex and you had to make alterations to the world or story to make it more cohesive? Or what did you do while writing to encompass those complex ideas?
You first, Tessa.
Ooh,
Because yours are beautifully complex, and sometimes I'm still amazed that you get them into a single book.
well, I do. I really, 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 both of my adult books are more ambitious than I could really handle, which I don't regret. Like, I feel like that is kind of a sweet spot.
Stretch yourself, yeah.
Yeah. And it took years for both of those books, the Queens of Innisleer and Lady Hotspur. And even though it was very ambitious and the structure was incredibly difficult to really wrangle and make sure it was in the right, like everything was in its place so that the relationships looked like a tangle but weren't actually a tangle. Like that felt like it was going to be too much and I would need to change things, but I had a very good editor and we worked on that and didn't end up having to really change things or alter anything. But Lady Hotspur was a nightmare, and I changed that book a lot because I couldn't settle on which idea to focus on. And I think that was really it. I'm not sure this is quite the question, but there were so many big ideas in Lady Hotspur that I was so invested in all of them. It was very difficult to finally be like, listen, Gratton, you have to pick what is the core. There can only be a core, and then it can have some satellites, you know, you get some, but there has to be that core. And that was very gutting. There's so much of that book that I had to trim away and like gouge away. So yeah. Oof.
Yeah. I had a very sobering experience similarly with the Galaxy game, because although it was my third book, it was the first one where I had an outline that I swore I was going to stick to. The other ones were more organic, where I would see where I was going, you know, at least like a good section ahead. But a lot of it had to do with coming to a draft and then seeing, as you say, where the core is, and then going back and doing the rewrites. But this time I was like, no, I have an outline, I'm going to stick to it. And then I think I was about a third of the way through when I said to myself, if you stick to this outline, this is going to be a book of 150,000 words. You're going to have to let go at least a third of your outline.
I mean, you can write a long.
I did not have it in me to do it then, okay? And I still don't think I have it in me right now. Basically, it would have unbalanced the whole book. So at that point, I was like, I have to find a new point of resolution. I have to find a new, I basically was like, you know what? I'm so sorry. There's another book after this. I didn't mean for there to be another book after this, but there's clearly another book after this. And right now I have to put this into something a little more manageable. So that was what happened to the Galaxy game. And it was a bit frustrating, but very educational at the time. And Galaxy game was definitely one of those books that it took me a very long time away from it to learn to love it again, because at the time I just felt like, oh gosh, this is whew. But then I came back to it and I was like, no, wait, hang on, this actually worked. Yeah, and the writing there is actually really good. I don't remember saying that. That's really smart. You know, it was like you were in a fugue state or something. Is that you and you?
How long did it take before you could like and admire things you'd done in Galaxy game before?
Sad to say, literally about 4 to 5 years. Okay. And some of it had to come through other people, where I think for me, a huge epiphany was when the paperback was launched, which is a year after the hardback, which doesn't seem like a long time. You got to remember that when we finish a draft, it's way before the actual publication, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm not talking about 5 years after publication. I'm talking about 5 years after finishing the main book. And they did a form of reading, which I really appreciate, and I try to duplicate whenever I can, which is to say, you just stand there and the people who are hosting say to you, I want you to read from page X to page Y. And you just do it. And then they'll ask you a question based on the reading that they chose. So I did a version of it here. Mm-hmm. And the bits that they chose were not bits I would have chosen, but they were bits that had beauty that surprised me. And that was a moment where I was like, no, wait a minute. If this is how it's hitting them, if this is how they see it, and I can see it only when I am made to stand up and read it myself, I need to let go of the stress of having created it and step back and look at it as a reader now and recognize that it's really got its own beauty. So how long does it take for you?
I don't know. I have never had that relationship with a book until Lady Hotspur. I still am like, well, I'm glad that book is someone else's problem now.
Give it a couple more years. Give it a couple more years.
Yeah. So hopefully in a couple years, I'll go back to it and be like, oh, you did good. You did good, Gratton. Strong word.
Sorry, we started talking away. There are other questions waiting for us, right?
Yeah, there are, but I'm loving the honesty that's coming into play here.
I may regret this honesty, but you know, editors who are out there, honestly, I'm easy to work with.
No regrets, right? Or no regrets, as some people say. So I'll shoot you a softball first, because I'm conscious that there are some writers in the audience who are going to ask you more sort of writing questions. So let's go into a softball from Patrick. What's the most recent book you read that you loved, and why did you love it?
Ooh.
I read the forthcoming Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse. I think it comes out October 13th or 15th. It is just amazing. It's an epic fantasy, sort of like an ancient Mesoamerican world, and all of her books and short stories are incredibly well written. I love her characters and you know, prose and everything, but this one just like sucked me violently in. From like the second page, I was like, oh, Rebecca Roanhorse owns me now. And she brings together some very interesting different characters and weaves you know from the beginning that everyone is coming toward the same moment, and you even kind of know what's going to happen in that moment, but you're still just like, oh no. I don't want to read any faster, but at the same time I want to read as fast as possible. I just loved it. And I can't believe that I have to wait, like, I don't know, 9 months at least until I can like beg someone for an early copy of the sequel. Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse.
Well, I swear I didn't plan this because these are the questions that are coming to us fresh, obviously. But the book that I recently read that I'm excited about is called Black Rain Falling by Jacob Ross. And it is a sequel to a book called The Bone Readers. And these are actually crime novels set in a fictionalized version of Grenada, because Jacob is Grenadian. He's based in the UK now. He actually works with People Tree Press. Jacob is actually brilliant. I've learned a lot about craft from Jacob because he knows the structure of genre, and he knows how to be literary, and he just like has a grasp of everything. But the real reason that I am so attached to Black Rain Falling is that he has got one of the best female protagonists I have ever encountered in a crime novel, Miss Stanislaus. She is like one of these very, just sort of seems so sweet and unassuming, and she's a deadly shot. And she's just like, I don't know, it's like a huge subversion of James Bond, where there's this woman who just seems so fragile and she's so deeply dangerous and she's been through a lot. And there's this scene, which I won't spoil for you, where she exacts vengeance. And she's just so incredibly, I've seen so many female protagonists, so many heroines who are drawn in a way where they're almost made, they're given boy traits, they're given boy hero traits. They're kind of, not made too girly in a way. And that's how they make them heroes. But Miss Stanislaus is totally girly, and she's also a deadly shot, and she will also get her vengeance. And she's also like pretty much the smartest person in the entire 2 books. And she just carries all that with a lightness and a sweetness, and, will still be like, baking stuff for her friends and what have you. And I just don't know how to express it, but I just love her very much. And the relationship she has with the main male protagonist as well is just absolutely fascinating. And if you have a chance to read those 2 books, The Bone Readers and Black Rain Falling came out just a couple of months ago, I believe. You need to just give yourself an opportunity to check a little bit about the history, the recent history of Grenada. We're talking about a little after the revolution, but just to give a sense of, because especially in this day and age, as we look at things like policing and corruption and whatever, the book is full of it. The book is full of it. It examines it in great detail. It's absolutely fascinating. It's very intelligent. And it's one of those books where you just feel so virtuous because you're having a fun romp, but it's dealing with some very, very serious issues. Next question.
Sure. Okay. So this is from Alex Terrell. It's for both of you. And the question is, what does your revision process look like? And does it vary from book to book? Can you tell that these are writers in your audience? Everyone is
like, hurt us, come on. What is your revision process like? Go on, Gratton, you first.
The last 2 times.
Okay, fine. My revision process. Well, when I used to have time, my revision process would start with me taking at least 3 months away from the draft to be able to look at it with a fresh eye. Because when you have just emerged from it, you are not at all an objective observer. You cannot tell what is there. What I have discovered since then, as my scheduling gets like tighter and tighter and tighter, is that sometimes you don't have the leisure of stepping away from that long. So you have to find some other tricks to give yourself the distancing so you can be better at critiquing. I've been fortunate to acquire some really good friends and colleagues who I can trust of looking at my rawest drafts, because it's not everybody you can trust with that. But Tramontaine, working together on Tramontaine taught us that. And I think that's one of the reasons why I trust Tessa that way. There are a couple of people locally I trust that way. And you can then look back at their comments, even though you haven't had time to to have a full distance. And then you can be like, oh wait, no, that resonates, that resonates. I try to get at least 3 different opinions and I triangulate so that it's very simple. If there's something that was vaguely bugging me and at least one other person mentions it, it's got to be dealt with. If there's something I didn't even notice, but 2 people mention it, it should probably be dealt with. If 3 or 4, the 3 people are mentioning it, I definitely got to deal with it. So you kind of overlap like that. If there's something that troubles like just one person, but maybe they're like a specialist in that area, I at least need to have a discussion with them, right? Be like, you know, okay, how did this hit you and why did it hit you that way? Maybe somebody just needs a little tweak. So it's very much about, you know, getting these overlapping opinions and then seeing what you can do there, because all you're really trying to do is to communicate clearly your story. You don't have to be too precious about it. You don't have to be too attached. If the reader cannot get what you wanted to convey, you're failing. So everything about the rewrites, everything about the edits is about getting that message, that story clearly across.
Yeah.
Fine. All right then.
I usually revise a draft once or twice at least on my own, because my first drafts, I do not enjoy outlining or like in-depth synopsis, because the more I know about the story, then the less I feel like telling it.
You need discovery, you need adventure.
I really need, when I set out to draft, I really want to know the emotional arc of the main few characters. Plot is basically irrelevant to me, which is a real problem during revisions. But if I get too bogged down in plot, then it holds me back with regards to emotional relevance and magic and relationships and things like that. But so I revise on my own a couple of times, because when I get to the end of a draft, I know a bunch of things that need to be fixed or things I want to change. And then I have readers also. My agent is usually one of my first readers. We've been working together for 10 years and she knows my work very well and we're very comfortable together. So when she sends me like a 20-page edit letter, I am fine now with that. If she ever sent me like a 3-page edit letter, I'd be like, there's something broken. The book is broken.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Like, you didn't complain about too many things, so either you're lying to me,
because you want to be told what's wrong. You know it's not perfect. You want the feedback. The feedback has to make sense, though.
Yeah,
I get enraged when I get feedback that's like making no sense, because I'm like, no, I've got other people around and they're not saying that. Why are you out there? But yeah, you want it. I
really do. And so I usually revise with my agent and then with another primary reader, and then revise again, and then get another reader, and then again my agent. And that is before a book even goes out to editors.
Yep.
And then it goes to my editor, and depending on the book, we do anywhere from 2 to, in certain cases, 7 rounds of developmental edits. And then if we have time, we do line edits. So for revising, I really like to map things out. My drafting is very messy and raw. And so when it comes time to revise, I have all these like diagrams for the shape of emotions for all the protagonists, all the villains. And then like I draw things on this whiteboard behind me.
Sweet.
Very frequently covered in shapes, because I really am a very visual and spatial learner. And so if I could do like 3D shapes, that would be amazing. So that I can figure out what the shape of the story is and then find the best way to like cram the raw draft into that shape.
Yeah, cool. You just remind
useless answer, but
I've just remembered one thing I want to add. When it came to Redemption in Indigo, because it was my first book and because I knew that I had an idiom that was basically a Caribbean idiom that not everybody would get, I was doing my PhD at the time in Wales, and I would give my book to people who didn't have English as a first language, because I figured that if I was clear with them, then it was clear. You know, it didn't have to be standard, but it was clear. So that was one thing that I did that I think was a cool thing to do. And I don't get the opportunity to do it very much now, but of course you get a professional editor and it's supposed to be of a certain standard. Yeah, there you go.
Our next question is from Sarah. I'm teaching a YA class this semester. What advice do you have for young writers working on YA fantasy or science fiction and embarking on ambitious projects?
That's all at you, Tessa.
Read a lot, read widely, and learn to identify what you think is done well, because then you can copy what people that you admire have done that has satisfied you. And I truly mean copy. Obviously not like in a plagiarism kind of way, but like you look at, okay, I love this book. What do I love about this book? You know, how did this author invoke this world? How did this author make me fall in love with this character or become invested in these stakes? Because, you know, I certainly have no experience like these stakes, particularly when you're talking about science fiction and fantasy. And then actually learn to identify, it was this sentence, this paragraph, this page, this chapter, and then see if you can map your writing onto that. So like the beats of the first chapter of your favorite book. I've done this both on my own and when I was teaching, actually taken the first chapter of a book that I love and mark everything in different colors. Like, okay, this is characterization, this is world, this is dialogue, and here's information you get from the dialogue, and then taken the story that I was planning to write and do it in the same pattern. You know, okay, the first line is a character line. So my first line is a character line. Then there's a hint of the world, and then it's tied together in dialogue, you know, like actually pull apart what you love. And I mean, I think that you can do this, you should do this with any genre, no matter what you're trying to write. But YA tends to be very immediate and concise. And so learning how authors do that, just like draw you into the interiority of a character in a book right away is a good place to start with writing YA fantasy and science fiction. I recommend Dread Nation by Justina Ireland, The Coldest Girl in Cold Town by Holly Black. I think those two books are just genius examples of YA books that bring you character, voice, world, stakes immediately in the first chapter. The whole books are great, but those first chapters are just so good at all of those things.
So the last question is, a lot of writers have very interesting, sometimes bizarre writing rituals or writing quirks. Do you have any, you know, one weird or interesting writing ritual that you keep returning to?
I wouldn't call it a ritual, but I realized that when I am writing something, doing a lot of world building. World building requires a lot of decision making. Decision making requires a lot of calories, but you're sitting down a lot. So sometimes the initial idea is, oh, well, I don't need to be eating as much as this. And then you realize, no, I need some fat for my brain to operate. So my kind of fallback food to fuel a lot of world building when I'm in the midst of drafting is a beef and potato roti and a small chocolate shake. That's my ritual.
That sounds delicious.
It does the job.
When I first started writing with the intention of getting published, so really trying to create rituals for myself, I had this moment where I decided that I couldn't create a ritual for myself that someone could take away from me, because I needed to be able to write no matter what. Like, I needed to be able to write at my day job. I needed to be able to write at 4 a.m, or, you know, at a lunch break or on a notebook. Like, I couldn't get too married to my laptop versus a notebook versus the time of day or whether I've exercised or any of those things. And so I tried really hard to train myself to not need anything. But I didn't realize I was doing this. I was also walking my dog every morning because it's good for me and my dog. And I realized at some point, when I don't remember why, maybe I had been sick or something, but I didn't go for a walk. I didn't just move my body. And I could not write, and I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't even think about writing. There was just something wrong. And eventually I realized that I had given myself more of a life ritual. And if I don't go for like an hour-long walk with some kind of inspirational music, like tailored to the project, I'm useless. So I have to move my body in order to write. So, I mean, I don't think that's very weird, but the closest I've had.
Exercise.
Yeah.
I think that we're just hitting 8:45, and that might be a good time. Gavin, can you bring your video back on? I think Gavin mentioned that he owns Book Moon Books, but did not mention Small Beer.
That's right, yeah.
Which is the publishing house that published Redemption and Indigo, that Gavin and Kelly Link run together. I want to thank all of you so much for coming today, and I loved the energy between the two of you. And I'm sorry that you can't hear us laughing. I think it's the never at you, always with you.
Of course.
And just a lot of what you said was so resonant, and I'm just really grateful for the generosity you showed today.
Oh.
It's something that I find in the science fiction and fantasy community always, and I'm just glad to create this space for more of it.
Excellent.
So much.
And thank you for allowing us to be like your first. That feels like a real, like a real honor. We kick things off. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very, very happy for it. So yeah, thanks all. We're going to put this recording onto our YouTube channel soon, by the end of the week. And otherwise, our next event, we should advertise that event.
Yes.
Is on the 27th of October.
Yeah.
With Cadwell, Turnbull, and Julie Day. So very excited for that. And there will be pre-registration links and such coming up. I tried to something. So, oh yes, there's Karen's book. Indeed, Gavin. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful evening. Thanks all for coming.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.